And I don't want to, steal any thunder here for the Campions, but their son, Peter, is that next week? Let's see, it'll be a week from Wednesday then. Was graduating from basic training. And I'll be honest with you, when I went to Ryan's, and again I'll steal maybe Mike and Bess thunder, but the only word I could think of was, for me, when I saw those soldiers come in formation, and so extremely disciplined, and handsome, and strong, not a pot belly among them. Not a pot belly among them. And when they stood, and those drill sergeants stood in front of them, and then walked from one side, and turned, and pivoted on one, like they do, and reviewed them. And then as the commander, the battalion commander stood, and those troops marched by, and when they got to the commander, as they turned and saluted, it was just glorious. And I thought, I'm so proud. I'm so proud to be an American. So, I don't want to steal, I'll shut up for now. But you have, I think, a glorious time. And, of course, everyone in the bleachers are saying, every once in a while you hear it, I see him! I see him! I see him! And oh, it's just so meaningful. And I don't think I'm going to hurt anything in my belly. I tell that one statement about, I love it when the, whoever's in charge, whatever commander, I don't know the line, and he said, you are looking at the finest soldiers in the world. And they stand there almost regal, glorious in one sense. And the company commander said, you are looking at the greatest soldiers in the world who are trained to fight on any battlefield, anywhere in the world, and win. And your heart goes from back here, up here. And from going from 5'8", the doctor said I'm 5'6 3/4", and I told him not to put it down. So you write down 5'8". I am 5'8", just because I'm over big for my age and kind of sunk down a little. Don't put down 6 foot. I mean, or 5'6 3/4". I've been 5'8" all my life, but anyway, if you're 5'8", you feel like you're 6 feet tall. A young lady, relatively speaking, a young lady asked me to give an illustration that I had given a long time ago over. And I promise this is not one I've given 20 times. I promise. I've only given it once. And she asked me to give this illustration over. And I would like to talk to you about a young man. At that time, in 1942, he was a young man. His name was Calvin Graham. Calvin Graham, in 1942, was disturbed by the words that he began to hear in his little Texas town that America was losing the war. That was just the rumors and the talk and what was going on, that they were losing the war in the Pacific. And so Calvin Graham enlisted in the Navy, by the way, Ben. Enlisted in the Navy. And he earned, I believe, 2 presidential citations. He earned the Bronze Star. He earned a Purple Heart. He earned certificates for 2 campaigns. He was injured, and he was definitely a hero. And I want to emphasize that to you today, that Calvin Graham was definitely a hero. That was in the summer of 1942, but in February of about 1943, Calvin Graham was sent home. He was not even discharged. He was released from the Navy. He was stripped of all of his awards, and he was stripped of all of his honors. In fact, he went back to Texas and he landed in Corpus Christi. 3 months in the brig. And then, until there was protest from his family, they finally released him, and he went home. As I mentioned, he was in the Navy. He was in the, on the battleship. He was assigned to the battleship USS Dakota, South Dakota. USS South Dakota. And he was in the Battle of Guadalcanal in the Pacific. On that battleship, that is the USS South Dakota, they blasted down 30 Japanese airplanes. Calvin Graham shot down 7 planes himself. And for some reason I can't read my own writing. I wish I had slowed down, you know, just a little bit. Actually, I could have told this by memory if I'd just done it, but I didn't do it. But anyway. For some reason, none of this makes sense, so we'll just go for it. But anyway, Calvin Graham, he himself shot down 7 aircraft, and the ship shot down 30. In a period of 2 minutes, a 2-minute period, while Calvin Graham was on the upper deck, getting all of the wounded and those who were killed, and bringing them down to the lower deck. But while he was on the top deck, in 2 minutes, their ship was hit 48 times. He was not only bruised, but cut and hurt. The concussion of the firepower from those airplanes hitting that battleship was so strong that Calvin lost all of his teeth. Now, I would say that Calvin Graham was definitely a hero. And when the smoke all cleared and it got quiet, Calvin was still standing. Although there wasn't much left of him, he was still standing. But I want to tell you, he was a hero. And he did, as I have already mentioned, that he fought, he gave his all, but then he was denied everything. I want to mention again that he received 2 presidential citations. He received the Bronze Star, and he received the Purple Heart. One of the greatest, he was one of the most decorated soldiers of that time. But in that day you could not, in 1943 and 44 and on, you couldn't find any record of Calvin Graham. Do you know why? Because that year in his life would become the most memorable year of his entire life. Calvin Graham was 12 years old. He had lied his age. And his mother ended up, while he was in the Pacific, after all the fighting, and evidently was afraid, and she realized what he had done. And she, of course, told the authorities. Of course, they grabbed him quickly and brought him out. I just want to mention this, that I did some reading. And all of his, it took years, and actually he didn't get, by the way, the presidents through the years, and we're talking in like the 70s and in the 80s, we're talking about he fought in 1942, 42 and 43. And it wasn't until the 70s and 80s that he was awarded some compensation, which out of, back then it was like $18,000 for his medical bills, and he only got about $1,400 through the years. He got most of his awards, and then except his Purple Heart, and then after he died, I think it was President Clinton awarded him his Purple Heart. I thought that was an interesting story. It's almost like, at any cost, whatever it takes, I'm going to fight, and I'm going to serve my country. And I think, what devotion. I want to tell you another story, and I won't read it because I can't read my writing, but I will if I can find the name of the guy. His name was Elgin Staples, and I thought it was an interesting story. He too was in the Pacific, fought, and actually about the same time, a little later than Calvin. He was on the USS Astoria, a ship that had been basically destroyed. He was awakened in about midnight, and so basically he jumped overboard and threw on his life belt and inflated it and jumped overboard. They thought the ship was going down. Well, the ship didn't go totally down, and so they thought it was going to stay above water. He was picked up by another destroyer, fed and cleaned up and got rested. They actually put the guys back on the ship. They thought it was going to float. But it ended up, the USS Astoria began to turn. It was done for. And so he had to hit the water again, so he grabbed his life belt and put it around him and jumped into the water and started swimming. Again, he was picked up by another U.S. destroyer. And then when he got home, he was telling his mother the story. And by the way, he had been through enormous combat as well. They had been shelled and shot at many times by the Japanese. He actually was in the battle for Guadalcanal as well. But anyway, when he got home, he was talking to his mother at the table. And they were just going over some things, and he mentioned to his mother, he said, one of the things that I wanted to make sure I brought home, and I held tight. And he said, that was my life belt. And the one reason is it was made by in Akron, Ohio. It was made by Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. And he said it was made, and he was from Akron, Ohio. He said, so I brought it home because it was made in my hometown. And she said, let me see your belt. That was his mother. And she said, during the war, she said, I volunteered. I volunteered to do a little bit and to do my part during the war. And she said, I helped make these flotation belts. And so he handed it to her. And she said, you know, I was an inspector there during the war. And she took that belt and she said, I was inspector number. And she told him the number. And her number was on that belt that he had bobbed around in the Pacific Ocean until those destroyers had picked him up. I thought that was an amazing story that a mom at home, doing something, in one sense kind of reached her arms around halfway around the world and helped save her son. So I guess whatever we do, even showing respect and encouragement and writing letters and saying prayers, of course, it's never mundane. But I believe God is interested in those who protect our freedom and our liberties that we have today. And I would just end by simply saying, as so many do, may God bless you. And I think we could all say, may God bless America. And we're thankful for our wonderful veterans. We're thankful for these gentlemen today that helped us in uniform, who helped us dedicate our flags. And we appreciate each and every one here today. Beth.